So let's look at an application of writing our code such that we're using functions. And so for this, we're going to create a multiplication table. So as a reminder, tables look like something like this. So I'm just going to do a 4 by 4. So typically we would have something that looks like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I might have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we just take each number on this row and multiply by all the numbers in the column. So 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 2 is 2, times 3 is 3, times 4 is 4. And then 2 times each of these numbers: 2, 4, 6, 8. 3 times each of these numbers: 3, 6, 9, 12. And I'm right hand justifying, so the 1 sticks over here. And then 4 times each of these numbers: 4, 8, 12. Same thing here. 16. And so I'm doing this to better understand what my process is. All right. So to produce a multiplication table, what do I need to do? Well, I like to do incremental development. Which means I'm going to do things in steps. But I also need to think about where I'm going. So as part of the design process, which is what I'm working on here, notice I'm starting with the destination. That is the output, and think, well, how did I get there? Just as if you're driving somewhere you've never been before. You start with the destination, then you look on the map and say, okay, from here, how do I get there? You don't just hop in your car and take off driving, probably. But a mistake that a lot of people, especially beginners, make when writing code, especially if they're doing it the night before the homework is due, they think, oh, I don't have time to sit down and work out the details. I just got to get busy typing. And they haven't worked out everything or how the relationships are between the different things they have to do. And so it's like getting here and just driving, going, well, no, I need to move over to here. No, I need to move over to here. And eventually you might make it there, but you made a lot of wrong turns along the way. So I can't necessarily work out every single detail, but I need to think about certain things along the way. And I want to think about it before I start typing. So what do I need to think about? Well, I said I want it right justified. And so we saw that when I went from 4 to 4, then I needed 2 columns worth of width, right? Because 16 took up 2 digits. And then there's some spacing in here. So let's say we'll make the spacing two spaces. What's the max I want for here? Well, in terms of displaying on my computer, I'm going to limit it to max size 15 by 15, which means that product there is 225. This number here needs to be 3 digits in width. Now you could write a lot of logic to figure out what the current max for the column is and sort of compress these, which only take up 1 digit, and use more digits of spacing for these. But I'm just going to say every column supports 3 digits of spacing followed by 2 spaces. So I'd have something like this: digit, 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 space, space. So that's a total of 5 columns of spacing, or 5 digits, let's say digits of spaces or spacing. So think about that. So this part to me is most important, and if I only did this, you still could understand what's happening. But to me, this is step 1. So I want to get that going first. Then what needs to happen? Well, I need to add these other 2 parts: the column numbers plus some type of separator, dashes or underscores, and the row values plus some type of separator. I'll use a vertical bar for this. But what needs to happen first? Well, I'm going to call this step 2, because that's going to be printed at the same part of the code where I'm printing the rows. Because I print 1 bar 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 bar 2, 4, 6, 8, and so forth. So that's step 2. And then once I have that worked out, then I'm going to add this, which is step 3. I can do this first, but if I don't get the spacing on it worked out, and then I come in there and add this, and maybe I need to play with this to get it looking the way I want, that can mess this up, so I'd have to go back and fix it. So instead, I'd rather do step 2 here, and then once I have the spacing worked out, then add step 3 based upon how much I did on this. So that's the rationale. So once again, I'm thinking it through first and trying to minimize the number of mistakes I make along the way. So let's see how to do that. So I'm going to use some functions. So I'm going to have a section here I call main, but this isn't necessary. I just do this because it makes it easier for me to see where the functions are at. And I need to get a number from the user. So let's start with this. N is equal to input. And this won't be right. I'm demonstrating something to you. I'm going to say enter size 15 rows max. But let's see what this gives me. So let's print N, and let's print the type that N is. $15 is max, so let's put in, say, 9. There's my 9, but it says it's a string. Input takes whatever you type in and stores it as a string, which is just some characters. So if I did something like this, it's a 1 character followed by 2 character followed by 3 character. We hadn't really talked about strings yet, so that may not mean a whole lot to you yet. But I need to do something about it, which is turn this into the integer of 123 if that's what I want. And I'm not doing any error checking. I could. In fact, we may. We'll even add that. So let's do this. No, we won't do that because that gets in some things I want to talk about right now. So what do we need to do to fix this? Well, I'm going to embed this function call inside another function call to this function, int. So now when I run it, there's 123, but it's an int. So I can do math with integers. I can't do math with characters. So we fix that. So now we're ready to call our function. We'll call it multiplication table, and we'll pass it in. So def mult table, and I'll call it in here as well. And it needs to do something. So I'm going to use a for loop. So for R for row value in range, what was our range? Well, we're going from 1 to whatever n is. So back over here, so I hit some characters and put that in there. 1 to n plus 1. Why is that? The range function expects you to give it a starting integer number, or it can default if you don't give it, a stopping value, and then a step size. So I want to go from 1 to n. So this is start at 1 in steps of 1, meaning you add 1 to this, then add 1 to that, and so forth. Because if I put 2 in here, it would be 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 2 is 5, and so forth, as long as the value produced is less than this number. So if I type in 4, it would produce 1, 2, 3 if this was 1 again. Now if the step size is 1, you can leave it out because it defaults to that. So I'm going to leave it out. So this means I'm going to produce 1, 2, 3, 4 if I want to go up to 4, because 4 plus 1 is 5, and that's less than, or 4 is less than that. So now we're going to do this, the column, and now I'm going to make a mistake. I want to print the numbers, but let's see what we need to consider here. So I want to print, and we said up to 3 digits of spacing, so percent 3D followed by 2 spaces to separate what comes next. R times C. Now there's a mistake in what I just did, not in terms of syntax, but in terms of logic. Let's see what it is, because as soon as I run the program, you'll know there's a mistake. We'll do 4. It just printed everything in one column, so what happened? Well, I mean, it is the right numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, 3, 6, 9, 12. Well, print automatically gives me a new line. So I need to suppress the new line. So what I'm going to do is say comma end equals, and I print nothing there. So now let's see what happens. Now there's another error of logic. Now it's all in one row, so once again it's to create numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, and so forth. So I need a new line right here after the 4. I need a new line right here after the 8. So where does that go? Well, I could do this and run it, but we're right back to the first thing. Because I said print a number right here, suppress the new line, then turn around and print a new line. So that's wrong. So what I need to do is this. And I'm going to add a blank line to make it a little easier to read, but that doesn't affect the performance. And we'll get that right there. So why did that work? Well, when this was indented, it's part of this loop, the one for C. But when I take out the spacing there, now it's at the same level as this loop, so it's really just part of this loop. So what happens is, this loop runs, and when it's done, then we'd leave that loop, return to this loop, and we print. And we get that right there. Or sorry, I didn't save it. Now we need to save it. Now we do this. And we get the table. So this looks correct. Now where are these spaces from? Well, they come from the 3D. So unless I want to write a lot of logic to try to get rid of that, which would require me figuring out what the max size is for that column, I just have to live with it. So I choose to live with it because I don't have to go that much effort. So that was step 1. So now step 2 is to add the number to the row indicating what's going to be multiplied by the row values. So where does that go? Well, it needs to happen before I print the row numbers. So it needs to happen here when I print the row number. So print. And I want the row number, which is R. And if we're only going up to 15, that means the maximum width will be 2 digits, %2D, and then we'll do space, a vertical bar, and leave it. Now right now, if I print it, we're going to get this. It's logically incorrect. Let's see what happens. Well, it's kind of doing what I want, but then there's a new line here. So just like before, I need to suppress the new line. And I got that right there. So that's all it took to add step 2. So now at step 3, above this, I want to add what I call a header. So let's think about what I have there. So I'm coming back to my design, and I can think about what I just did. So I said this right here, we'll write it again here, 1, 2, ... potentially up to 15. Then I had a space, which I'm going to write with an underscore, then a bar, where that's a bar. And this is a 1. So what was that? Well, there's the edge of the page or the screen. So this was 1 space, 2 spaces, a space to match this, and a space to match this. If I want the dashes to start here, so I would insert 4 spaces before that. Now if I want the dashes for the separator to start here, I only use 3 spaces. So let's try that and see what happens. Now, where would that go? Well, I could put it right here, but I'm thinking about it being a separate thing. And so I want to create another function right here, print header. And it needs to know what the size n is. Could I write out the logic for the header here? Sure. But I don't need to. Def print header. Because as we'll see, the number of lines of code for the header is actually more lines of code than I had right here. So I'm going to create a separate function, and then if I want to change the header or not use it at all, I can just comment out this line. So we said I need to print some spaces. Let's put some blank lines here. 1, 2, 3. But then I want to start printing the row, or excuse me, the column numbers on the same line. So I'm going to suppress the new line. So let's start with this, end equals. And I'm going to steal this stuff right here. And this needs to be at the same level of indentation, so 4x. And we want to make this this right here. But we do eventually want a new line. So let's try that and see what happens. It's not indented right. So this right here needs to be 4 because the numbers themselves will scoot over, but the dashes will be something else. It looks right. Let's try the 15 while we're here, just to see. Yep, everything's lined up. This is right. Now I'm going to put a bunch of dashes in here to be a separator. So where does that go? Well, it's going to be something like this. Or actually we'll say so some spaces, but now this will be dashes. So how many dashes do I need? Well, here was 3 columns of width plus 2 spaces, so it's a total of 5. And we won't need this anymore. So let's see what happens. Okay. Because I chose to put the first dash in line with this, I only had 3 spaces here. And then I print all the spaces. And does it matter that it sticks out too far? No, I'm fine with that. I think it looks fine. If I wanted to deal with that, I'd have to add some logic to fix it. And probably what I do would add the logic to make the last thing not print 5 dashes, but instead just print 4 if I was trying to fix it. So let's see if we're almost done. Let's go up to 15. This looks right. We're on spot check. 10 times each of these numbers will be 10, 20, 30, 40, all the way over to 150. That looks right. 15 times 15 is 225. I think our multiplication table is done. So could we improve it? Sure. You could change the spacing, whatever. But if I change this spacing, I'm going to have to fix this as well. Could we fix that in a more scalable way? Sure, we could do all that. You could always add more capabilities to make it look more aesthetically pleasing if that's what you want. All right. So what about my functions? Do they all need to be here? No. But they do need to be before I'm using them. So let's say I did this. I prefer them to be up here, but let's see what happens if I were to put them at the end. Python will let you do stuff like this, but the problem is I'm calling this function before I get to this. And see, it says I don't know what that is because it processed it top down. When here it says, okay, let me call this function. Where is that function? I don't know what that is. We'll try 7 this time. 7 times 7 is 49. So there you go. Like I said, could I have taken this code right here just to show you? I could do this. It still works, but the functions start to get longer, and I'm thinking, okay, what part was what? And I probably would add now a comment saying, print header, if I chose to do this, and then down here I'd probably say something like print products. That is, the row times the column gives me a number. I can do that, but I think it's easier to read if I leave it the way I had before, which is a header function and then the products part. But it's a matter of opinion. All right. So there's our application of creating a multiplication table. And as I said in the functions video, going forward, you'll see me use functions a lot more because they do aid in readability and code reuse. All right?